Would you like a microphone?
No, well,
Can everyone
do I
hear
need a
me okay?
do I need a microphone? Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I prefer not to not to have a microphone.
I wasn't feeling well, so I wasn't sure. I'm really
Yeah,
loud
no,
normally.
I'm good. Donald said I had stamina, so I can do it. So, we're going to talk about grit today, but I want to give you a couple statistics that I think are going to shock you. Did you know that 13% of millennials show up at a job interview with their mom or their dad?
No.
No.
You're lying.
13% of millennials show up at a job interview with their mom or their dad.
That's funny.
It's sad, it's scary, right? What's that saying? You know, I've given 45 speeches in the last 12 months on grit to CEO groups, and only one CEO said, that happened to me and I hired the guy. And I said,
He interviewed one too.
and I said, why? And he said, because it was my #1 customer. It was the son of my #1 customer. So, right there. So there's the harsh reality. And I said, how did he do? And he said, actually, not too bad. So he goes, I got lucky there, right? Next statistic. Is there any way we can kill that light so I'm not blinded by that? Yeah. Great, thank you. Okay, that helps. Next statistic. Our place in the world in terms of math, reading, and science from World War II to today. Anybody want to take a guess where we're at? Where we were and where we're at?
About 60.
Well, in World War II we were at number 5. Today we're at number 31. So that's a challenge if we're going to compete in a global market. Third statistic. In terms of personal responsibility, like saving money or being healthy, do you know where we are in terms of being overweight and obesity in this country?
37%.
Number one.
It's 1/3 is considered obese. 1/3 is considered overweight. So now that's 2/3 in the gone too far category. And the last remaining third is where we should be. So I give these to you some statistics saying, you know, my question is, are we losing our grit in this country? And when I say grit, it is, are we losing our ability to do whatever it takes to get the job done, whether it be in marriage or health or work or savings or, you know, you pick it. Are we losing the ability to do that? And what happens if you start calling on companies as salespeople who are talking to people who've lost their grit too? Whatever happened to having the difficult conversation? The let's get real, we lost our funding, but I don't have the guts to tell you we lost our funding. So what does that do to us as salespeople as we're out there trying to sell? So that's part of what scared me. So to me, grit is defined as doing whatever it takes to get the job done. Now, when I say whatever it takes to get the job done, I mean morally and legal and ethically. But if you want to get that big deal, are you willing to call higher in the organization than you are used to doing? Are you willing to call wider in the organization than you're used to doing? Are you willing to ask that scary question about who else are you talking to? And yet we don't ask that question. So, you know, I'm looking at it going, are we willing to do what is needed to either be successful in sales and qualify that deal or disqualify it early? Am I making sense? Mm-hmm. And the challenge is, in a world where people now get instant gratification with very little effort, they didn't have to work hard to accomplish it and go, woohoo, I accomplished it. They're getting instant gratification, and we're in a society where everybody gets a trophy or a ribbon for just showing up. So what does that do in terms of trying to develop grit? in terms of, when I say grit, I'm thinking about dealing with adversity, pushing through hardship, having resilience, tenacity, really finding a way to make it happen versus hope it happens. Am I making sense? Am I being too harsh here?
No.
Okay. You just interviewed a millennial with a parent, is that what I heard? Tell us about that.
Well, she showed up with a mom.
Showed up with her mom and actually brought her mom into the office for the
She
interview.
waited outside. But
When is she starting? Just kidding.
The mom or the daughter?
The mom, yeah, the mom. When is the mom starting? So that's our challenge. That's what we're up against. So I think it becomes even more important that, grit wasn't a word we would have had during World War II because it's a cultural thing. They had it then. They made sacrifices. They did whatever they had to do. They joined the military. They worked on farms. By the way, anybody here ever worked on a farm before? With animals? What happens when everybody has the flu and the animals are sick? Or, sorry, when you're sick and the animals have to be fed? What happens? The animals still get fed, don't they? It's non-optional behavior. And we've gotten away from non-optional behavior. So we've learned that we can do what we like, and if we don't like it, we just give up and we quit. So those are things I want you to think about. Now, last night, in my effort to do some research, I've got access to a database of a million, analytics on 1 million salespeople. So I found some statistics that I want to give you, but I had to totally revamp my speech, so I'm gonna cheat and use my notes and be shameless about it. So if you're okay with that, because I figured I'd rather give you the updated information than my memorized talk. So when I think of grit, name some names of people who you think are famous people who you think are gritty.
Well, I think the Olympics, everybody we saw in the Olympics are pretty.
Absolutely. The Olympic, the fact that they even made it there, whether they won or not, the hours they had to go, most of them start practicing when they're 4. They're practicing 12 to 16 hours a day in addition to going to school and homework. They practice 6 days a week. And when they make it to the Olympics or they think they stand a shot, they start practicing 4 years in advance to get to that point. That's why all these gymnasts look like they're 10. Because they came somersaults out of the womb, right? But they wanted it. Name some other people you think are gritty.
Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan? Yeah, I always think of, if I think of business people, I think of like Bill Gates is somebody, or Steve Jobs. If you saw anything or read anything about Steve Jobs, he was kind of tenacious and kind of hard guy to work for, but he expected a lot, and he made amazing things happen. Michael Jordan is somebody, Tiger Woods at one point fit that category. If you want to think more altruistically, Mother Teresa was somebody who was really gritty about helping the downtrodden. They were tenacious about it. And if you look at it, every single one of them had a vision of where they wanted to be. And that vision is what drove them to do the things that other people weren't willing to do. That's really because if you look at grit comes from what's my why, what's my passion, what's my vision, and that's got to drive you to get to where you want to be. And if you don't have that, you're kind of out of luck, because when you need to pull on grit and step up, you won't be able to do it. That's a challenge. Muhammad Ali had this quote. He said, "I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit. Suffer now and live the rest of your life like a champion." That's exactly it. So some of you have heard this story before. I don't know how much detail I've told. I got fired from my first sales job. The CEO, I'd been there for a year. I was a technical guy, got recruited, came in, and the CEO calls me into his office. He says, "I'm going to let you go." And I looked at him and said, "No, you're not." And he said, "What?" I said, "You're not going to let me go. I'm hitting my numbers. There's no reason for you to fire me. Why are you going to let me go?" And he said, "You aren't hitting your numbers." I said, "Okay, come with me." So we went to my office, and I had my little spreadsheet there, and I had every conversation I ever had, and every purchase order, and every deal that I booked, and if we were in front of a judge and a jury, I could have proven that I was hitting my numbers. And he said, "I'm still going to let you go." And I said, "Why?" And he nailed me, and he was right. He goes, "You're in a funk." And I said, you're right, I am in a funk. My sister tried to commit suicide in my girlfriend's house, and it didn't help my relationship very well. So, you know, it's like, okay, I'm in a funk. So I said, I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. I'm going to work the next 30 days for free. You and I are going to pick a number. I'm going to hit that number. And when I hit it, you will pay me retroactively, and you will keep me. He goes, okay. I said, there's one other thing. Because while we were going through my deals, we discovered that my sales manager had been taking credit for my bigger deals.
Oh.
He'd been stealing my business. And I'm sure I'm not the only one in the world that's ever had that happen to, right? But he'd been stealing my business. And I said, okay, there's one other thing. He goes, what's that? I said, you make me sales manager. He goes, okay, squirt, hot shot, you're on. And I said, yeah. And I said, if I miss it by 0.1%, you'll get to keep everything. I will thank you for keeping me or giving me a shot, and I will leave quietly and graciously, and you can laugh all the way to the bank. He goes, okay, you're done. Guess what happened for the next 30 days? Because I'd never learned to sell. We had no process. We hadn't learned any skills. I'd never sold before. It was just a year of smiling and dialing and grinding it out, which most of us have done at some point in our lives. So for the next 30 days, Monday through Friday, because we didn't have a territory, I started calling the IT director on the East Coast at 6 or 7 in the morning, because that's when they came in. And I stopped at midnight because I could still catch people in Hawaii because it was 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock there. So those were long 16, 17, 18-hour days. In the meantime, because I'd never learned to sell, I bought books on tape. Yeah, we had tapes. That wasn't 8-track. Wasn't that far back. Okay. We had books on cassette, and I would listen to a cassette on the way into work on sales. You know, Brian Tracy, Dennis Waitley, Earl Nightingale, you know, some of the old timers, right? Glenn, you know the names of those guys, right? And then I'd listen to one on my way back home. And then on Saturday, I would come in and do 4 hours of cold calling. Yeah, I had to give up Barney and Dora the Explorer. They weren't around there, but I gave up my cartoons because I did love cartoons. I would come in for 4 hours and make cold calls for 4 hours on Saturday morning. And you know what's amazing?
You get people.
I would get people. IT directors were working on Saturday, and nobody called them except who? Well, their kids or their spouse, right? And now, me. But you know what? I wanted it. I wanted it badly. There's one other thing I did. I went out and I found a mentor. Somebody was a sales coach. I'd never heard of a sales coach before, but I found somebody who was a mentor. Now, this guy had been, he was a retired VP of sales. He was a former Vietnam vet. He was battling some of his demons from Vietnam, so he was a chain smoker. And he wouldn't leave his house, so I had to go see him. Now, I walked into his house. He had 9 cats.
Oh, gracious.
And between his 9 cats, and I'm allergic to cats,
Oh, man.
between his 9 cats and chain smoking, it smelled like he hadn't opened up the windows in years. And when you walked in that house, you wanted to gag. And it took everything I had not to gag. But you know what? He was a good coach. We talked about what I did, what worked, what didn't work. We role played, we practiced my skills. Why? Because I was going to turn Bob, the sales manager, into my bitch. Sorry. That's exactly what I was going to do. I wanted to win. So at the end of the 30 days, sucking it up and doing whatever I had to do, I hit my number. Joe, the CEO, kept me, made me sales manager. And I kept Bob because I thought he'd make a pretty good sales rep. So that's what happened. Now, that's my example of grit. And all of you have an example of grit too. It may not have been in sales. It might have been in a course that you took in school that you wanted to drop but didn't because you were determined to get through it. It could have been you wanted a car because your parents weren't giving one to you. So you went out and got a job while you were going to school and found a way to get the money to get the car. It could have been with a health issue. You decided you wanted to improve your health somehow, or you wanted to be in sports. I saw an interview with the, not this last Olympic, but the previous U.S. women's soccer team. And there were 6 women on the team who said, the best thing that happened to me was I got kicked off the team when I was a kid. I got cut because I had to decide Did I want to step up and do the job then, or did I not? Now, a lot of people got cut and probably quit and said, soccer's too hard, take me out, coach, I'll go do something else. And you know what? That's okay, because that wasn't compelling for them. But for these 6, it was a defining moment. And we in sales have that opportunity too. We have a defining moment. It is that time when we get to stretch and struggle, or not stretch and acquiesce. And in some cases, if it's dealing with a difficult prospect, supplicate. It's like that dog, that little dog that lays down in front of the other dog and exposes its neck. That's our choice. Am I making sense here? Okay. So that was my getting fired story. The thing behind that story really comes down to how badly do you want it? And I think that's, that to me is what grit is about. How badly do you want it? Now in sales, how badly do you want that big deal? How badly do you want to get that appointment? How badly do you want to hit your quota? We could expand that. How badly do you want that relationship to work? How badly do you want to lose weight? How badly do you want to go to school? I mean, there's lots of how badly do you want it? And by the way, we don't want it the same in all different categories in life, and it ebbs and flows. Sometimes I want more in education, sometimes I want more in health, sometimes I want more in relationship. But it is that, what is that why behind you that's driving it? Because without that why, the rest of what I'm going to tell you isn't going to work. That's the challenge. So how badly do you want it? Grit in sales. Let me just drop this here. So we know when we did evaluations on salespeople, here's some statistics we know for sure. Salespeople that have high grit compared to average grit sell anywhere between 146% more to 320% more than the average salesperson, just on wanting it badly and doing whatever it takes to get it. We also know that salespeople with low grit are 3 times more likely to quit. They'll quit the job. They'll quit making the effort. They're the ones that come in at 10 and leave at 4 and are behind on quota, versus the gritty one that really wants it, who comes in at 8 and stays till 6 or 7 or whatever they've got to do. But that's the difference. That's what we know. High grit salespeople sell a whole lot more, and low grit salespeople 3 times more likely to quit. And that's not just sales, that's employees in general. So where do we learn grit? Where did you learn grit? We learn it from our parents, right? Or not. Or we learn it from our first job. Who is our sales manager? And what message did he or she give us? Did they say, go for it, take a chance, get outside your comfort zone, let me help you, let me show you what's possible? Or did they not give you any encouragement or support? Am I moving around too much? Okay, back up a little bit. So we learned it from our parents. We learned it from the jobs. We learned it from our peer. We learned it in school. Anybody here play sports? You learned it in sports, right? Especially the football players talk about in August doing 2-a-days when you're there in the morning, you're there in the afternoon, and you think you're going to die of heat exhaustion. But if you played sport or music, if you learned a musical instrument and you did it more than 6 months, you wanted to get really good at it. I mean, all these things are where you learn grit. If you lived on a farm, if you had a paper route, if you shoveled snow, if you mowed lawns, if you babysat. These are all ways and opportunities where you got to learn grit. Fred, you're smiling. Did you babysit? Just kidding. You might have. I did.
I did actually.
Yeah, I liked babysitting. Babysitting was pretty
Listen,
cool.
it's a lucrative business in this area.
Well, and if you like kids, it's a great job. I liked it. So that to me is where grit is learned. So here's the statistics I wanted to give you. So last night I sat down, I started doing the analytics. I'm going, I haven't looked at the stats for a while. Let me pull this up. So I looked at, over the last 4 years, high grit. I'll give you 4 categories of salespeople. So the first group I'm going to call are climbers. So if you're mountain climbing, these are the ones that are climbing to get to the top. I'm going to call these folks elite. And there's only 7% of the population. Now I looked at 248,000 salespeople over the last 4 years. That's the data that I took. 7% of salespeople, I would call them elite. Now, what do I mean by that? They're the ones who find the way. They're the ones who are the little engine that could. They're the ones that don't make any excuses. So I looked at it and said, okay, how many of them get it? How many of them want it? And how many of them are capable? So for those of you who are sales managers or VPs and hiring people, that's a good question you should be asking yourself. Who gets it, who wants it, and who's capable? Okay? So I looked at it and said, okay, high grit salespeople, they get it, they want it, and they're capable. In terms of their will to want to sell, this was interesting. They had a extremely high no excuses score. Committed, high commitment, committed to doing whatever it took, and no excuses. Nice combination, huh? I looked at their sales DNA. This is the belief systems and sometimes I call it head trash they have between their ears. Extremely high sales DNA, meaning they fought their demons and they had done the hard work, so they were not afraid to have a difficult conversation. They were not afraid to ask the tough questions. They were not afraid to call higher in the organization. They were not afraid to confront somebody if they were giving them a little bit of BS. They were willing to take it on. In terms of selling skills, looking at hunting, qualifying, positioning, posturing, value prop, whatever you want to call it. Hunting, qualifying, positioning, consulting, and closing. Had the highest skills of anybody, not a surprise. In terms of sales process and ability to stick to sales process and ability to execute, highest scores of any group that I had seen. So to me, these are the folks, oh, and there's one other thing I noticed. They paid their own money for their own sales education. Pretty interesting. Paid their own money for their own sales education, and they spent somewhere between $7,500 to $15,000. I thought, huh? When you pay your own money, you're pretty committed, aren't you? So that was one thing. In terms of, I think of a sales rep. Some of you know Mike Schmidtman, and he tells a story about a sales rep that he had named Kelly. Kelly, they were selling phone systems at the time. She worked for him, and they were trying to get into a company named Booz Allen. She had heard that they had an old system, that it wasn't working, that their IT guy was holding it together with Band-Aids, bubble gum, string, whatever, but somehow it was working. And she heard through the grapevine the guy was working day and night. So she tried to reach him for months and got nowhere. No return email, no return phone call. And one night she said, you know what? If this guy's really working day and night, why don't I try to call him in the wee hours of the morning and see what happens? So she called him at 3 a.m. and got him. Now, I love this. How many of us would say, I want to get to so-and-so so badly that I think I'll make a cold call at 3 a.m.? Some of us might say that's insane. But she wanted it. And guess what? She actually got the guy. And he said, what you heard is right, and I am working day and night, the fact that you got me at 3 in the morning, and I'm interested in talking. Can you meet me at 1 a.m.? Guess what? She did. And long story short, she went and met with the guy, got a 9,000 phone unit order for $7 million. That's the starting point. It was the biggest sale made in the telecom industry that year. And because they had a land and expand strategy, it's turned into a $40 million deal. All the little add-ons. Now the funny thing about this was, I've always heard him tell this story. I never knew who it was. And I was talking to him earlier this week. This is somebody that I had trained. She paid her own money for training with myself and my partners. Some of you know Ganesh. With myself and my partners when she was working for Mike. And she went and made this happen. So, that to me is an example of what I call the climber, the elite, because they'll do whatever it takes. Who's going to make a phone call at 3 a.m. and who's going to go actually have a sales appointment at 1 a.m.? But that's what it took. So I think that's pretty impressive. The next category what I call the backpackers. You know, they got the weight on their shoulders, they're climbing up the hill, it's not going to be any easy journey. They're very strong at what they do, and to me, the statistics that I found was 14% of them, 14% of the existing sales reps are what I call the backpackers. Now, when I looked at them, they are a slightly watered down version from the climbers. In every category, in terms of they get it, they want it, and they're capable. Every bit as strong, just slightly less. It's kind of like a vodka with a splash of water. Okay, they were just slightly less. When I looked at their will, their level of commitment, and make no excuses, also very high, just slightly watered down, I mean literally by just a few points. When I looked at their sales DNA, their mindset, their belief system, same thing. Almost as strong as the climbers, just a smidgen less. And when I look at their sales skills, same thing. Their ability to hunt, position, qualify, consult, and close, also just slightly less. And they also invested in themselves. They paid a little bit less from what I had seen, but they spent roughly between $5,000 to $12,000 investing in themselves at getting better at professional selling. Interesting. When you pay money for something, you seem to pay more attention to it. And it makes me think of a woman that I know named Ann who worked at BMC, now works at Gartner. Ann was, every year, her sales manager would put her in a territory that everybody knew was total waste of time, absolutely useless. There was no money there to be had at all. And year after year, they would give her the dog territory, and year after year, she would hit quota. And they kept wondering, how does she do this? She was smart. She would plan, she would strategize, she'd look at accounts to go, which one do I stand even a snowball's chance of getting? She was very capable, very intelligent, and very likable, and she was fearless, and she would make the phone calls. The only reason I tell you I put her in the backpacker category was while she was doing all of this, she was taking care of her sick mom. So she wasn't putting in those 12, 16-hour days. She was coming getting it done in 8, 9, 10 hours, and then going home and taking care of her sick mother. So personally, I would put her in the elite category. The only reason I put her in the backpack is she had other constraints outside of work that limited her time. But like I said, the backpacker is a slightly watered down version of the elite, and she's pretty amazing, pretty amazing. Next one, campers. Campers are what I call serviceable. They're acceptable, they're okay, they're kind of average, and what we're seeing is 35% of the sales reps fit the average category. Now, in terms of get it, in terms of want it, and in terms of capable, they usually get it. They're usually capable, but they don't really want it. I want it if it's easy, but I don't want to come in earlier than 8, and I don't want to stay any later than 5. And please don't ask me to work weekends or work on special projects. It is, I want to go camping. I want nice humidity, low humidity, nice temperature, bug-free, mattress in the tent, and can somebody make my s'mores for me? And that to me is what the campers are. When I look at their will, how badly they wanted it, they have average level of commitment, meaning the commitment was conditional. If it got too hard, they'd say, take me out. They had lower scores on excuse making, meaning they had excuses, and the challenge for us as managers or VPs or as peers who are working on a team, their excuses actually sound legit because they sound real. Or they didn't have any money. Did they not have any money because they truly didn't have any money? Or did they not have any money because that was the excuse they gave you and you accepted it and you didn't talk about money earlier in the sales process? They know they're going to tell you no, so they let you down easy by telling you, we don't have any money, as an example. So when I look at that will to sell, they weren't that hungry. They were willing to do what was easy. They weren't willing to do what was hard. When I look at sales DNA, their mindset, their belief system was not supportive of them doing the hard, complex, difficult sales. So they'd be good for consultative selling light. Not consultative selling, where you have some competition or you have some struggle or you have to do some work. You have to have some difficult conversations. They were good for consultative selling light. And their skills. Skills were average. They needed help. They needed development. They were not good at hunting. They could get there if they wanted it. They weren't great at their value prop or positioning themselves. They weren't great at qualifying. They weren't great at consulting. And their closing skills were really bad. So that's a challenge. And it makes me think of a guy named John, not his real name because I want to protect some people. This guy had 15 deals in his pipeline, all reasonable, sizable deals. He's now down to 2. I've been trying to coach him on how to get this one deal. So hear about this deal. His deal, he got it because this prospect called him and said, I talked to somebody who uses your services. They gave you glowing reviews. I want the same thing that they're getting. How do we make that happen? And they had a meeting. Right? Now that should be a short sales cycle. And we know on those kind of deals, that's an 80 to 90% close rate. We know that. Instead, the boss introduced somebody new into the process and delegated it. That person they delegated it to doesn't want this to happen. It's now dragging. And John is afraid to go back to the boss who called him and said, I want to get this done, and have the conversation to bring him back in. So he's not sticking with the sales process. He's not comfortable having I'm going to call it a difficult conversation. I don't even see it as a difficult conversation. Hey, you called me. You want this. We got this other person doesn't seem to be that engaged. Why don't we sit down and have a conversation and get us all on the same page? When should we do that? And instead he's letting it drag out for months. And you know what? Yeah, Jose, you're shaking your head. You know what's happening. It's going nowhere. It's over. He's dragged his feet too long. And he just doesn't know it. And that to me is what the campers are. That's why I said consultative selling light. Not the strength that we need. And then the last one, I'm going to call these criers. These are ones that cry. They're weak. They're 44% of sales reps, when I looked at these numbers, 44, yeah. You know them, you've talked to them, you've heard them, right? They cry about everything. And so it's 44% of the salespeople who are just too weak to be in sales, even transactional sales. So, do they get it? Usually not. Do they want it? Usually not. Are they capable? Definitely not. When you look at their level of commitment, very low. When you look at their level of excuse making, extremely high. Oh, by the way, their excuses, some sound legit and some don't. We at least cast those going, so-and-so's full of excuses, right? So that's one part. When we look at their sales DNA, in terms of the belief systems they need to support them in sales, terrible. They never got the right support. They never got the right belief. They were never in the right environment that pushed them. By the way, I was on Glassdoor last night. I was looking at some of the Vorsight reviews. And Steve, I loved, where are you? Okay. So it was fun to read them because every now and then you saw somebody who said, hey, great opportunity, work hard, they really invest in their people. If you're willing to work hard and take the training, it'll set you up for your future sales. And then I saw others these guys are slave drivers and there's no opportunity. And you just saw the difference between the climbers and the criers right there on Glassdoor. It was amazing. I'm like,
I love Glassdoor, isn't it great?
yeah,
Anonymous, that's my favorite part.
Yeah, well, exactly. So,
your anonymous profile, come on.
It's anonymous unless you pay them and then they take it off.
Yeah, so it's blackmail.
yeah, and which review did you write, by the way? Just kidding. So, sales skills, pathetic. Can't hunt. I mean, in every category I looked at, they were not strong in a single one. They were not strong on hunting. They could not position themselves. They could not qualify where the hoot. They couldn't consult at all, and their closing skills were abysmal. So even if they happened to get it to the end, The only reason they're going to close is because the customer begged them to take the deal. True, true. And I'm just thinking about the guy I had in mind, again, I won't use his real name, so I'm going to call him Mike. Mike has a nationally named account all just for him. The company does really good work. They actually had an internal champion at that company who wanted to promote him to all the 40 offices around the country. Fantasy come true. And that key champion said, would you put a couple things together for me so I can float it out there and help spread the word? All he had to do was put it together. 6 months later, still hadn't put it together. Anybody want to know why?
Fear?
No, it's not my job. That was the product manager's job, and I'm still waiting for him to do his job. 2 years later, still not done, and she gets reassigned, the champion, to another position in the company. Has nothing to do with what they're doing, so he lost that opportunity. And he's never talked to her since then, and he never found who took her place. He's done nothing. And when you ask him about his pipeline and what the next opportunity is, he's got nothing in his pipeline. He said, oh, there's something coming up, but it's 4 years from now. Yeah. How long do you think?
How much of the failure of that is the sales manager?
Well, and that's
Not just
absolutely,
the sale rep.
absolutely.
That's clear. That's just bad management. From the
So the VP is no longer there,
perspective. Yeah.
and I keep saying to the CEO, why do we tolerate mediocrity? Why do we tolerate mediocrity in sales reps, or in operations, or in production, or in our own life? When it's something that we want badly, you know, okay, listen, I'm not going to become a master quilter. I'm mediocre at quilting and always will be. I'm okay with that. But in terms of building my business, or in terms of selling, or in terms of taking care of clients, mediocrity does not work for me. And I'm gritty about that, and I'm sure many of you are too. So that's, but yes, that's called poor management and unacceptable. So, how many of you know Jeff Foxworthy? You know, you must be a redneck when? Okay, so I was reading through, because I wanted to come up with a kind of a fun, pithy of, you know you need grit when. So I saw, okay, so a couple of his things were, you know you're a redneck when you cut your grass and you find a car. That's pretty good. You know you're a redneck when your wife has said, can you move this transmission so I can take a bath? And I go, okay, so these aren't that funny, but I'm going, how do you know when you might need a little help with grit? So I put down here, your boss takes credit for your deals and you don't say anything. Kind of like, you know, my first experience, right? But I did say something. Your prospect lies to you and you keep your mouth shut. Your prospect makes a commitment but doesn't honor their word. You schedule an appointment and they stand you up, you know, with no explanation. You discover the decision maker isn't the decision maker until after the decision was made. You accidentally got copied on an internal email that disses you and makes fun of you, and you don't say a word about it. Your client promises a testimonial, and that was 6 months ago. You negotiated a volume discount, and 12 months later, you're still not getting the volume. And you didn't ask an important question because you were afraid it would be blunt, confrontational, or they might get upset. So I know they're not as funny as Foxworthy, but I'm going, how do we tell when we might be a little light on grit? So let's talk about what can we do to improve our grit. Everybody ready for this? Okay, so what can we do to improve our grit? So to me, there's two key components of grit. The first one I've mentioned already. It's your why. What is your why? And when I say why, I mean a compelling, driven why. Not a, yeah, it would be nice to do this. You know, there was a phrase I saw, which I really loved. It said, when you want to succeed as badly as you want to breathe, you will be successful. And if we had time, I'd have everybody hold their breath for a minute till you couldn't hold it anymore. And when you just let it all out, going, that's what your why should feel like. That it should be a passion, it should be a vision. When I say passion, I don't mean necessarily positive passion. Passion is something that's compelling. It might be driven by negative emotions. So you'll see things like anger, love, ego, all those things, something that drives you. My business is way up this year, and my why is I got engaged to a woman with a 90-year-old mom who's running out of money, and I may have to get a house and move us all in together. So, my financial obligations just tripled. I got a pretty compelling why. So that's one. So, to me, the why is everything. Without the why, the second piece of grit won't work. And that's the try. How hard are you willing to try at getting better at sales or at building your business? It's that try part. So, am I willing to stretch and get outside my comfort zone? Am I willing to have an analysis done to be evaluated to find out, HR would call this a gap analysis? Am I willing to admit that I'm not so strong in some areas and put my ego at the door? So what's that try? So let's look at the try. So the try is, to me, it's about execution. Improving my sales skills, improving my mindset, improving my belief system, improving my sales process, getting coaching, debriefing deals, strategizing deals, all that's part of the try. And when I think of try comes into 4 categories. So the first one is called mindset, or I use GRIT as an acronym, G-R-I-T. So G is growth mindset, R is resilience, I is initiative, and T is tenacity. So G is the growth mindset. What is your mindset? Are you coachable? Are you open to ideas? Are you looking for resources? Are you looking for what experts can I use? Are you asking yourself, who else has done this and been successful and can guide me through this process? So to me, that's what the growth mindset is. It's also part of preparation. And what do I need to do to get better? What do I need to do to raise the bar? So that to me is the G in the growth in the grit. Next is resilience. Resilience is, what am I doing to toughen up? Where am I willing to stretch? Am I willing to take some risk? Am I willing to call high and maybe get shot down? Or am I willing to call higher up and maybe somebody gets upset at me? Or am I willing to ask the tough conversations or tough questions that other people aren't willing to ask and know that I might get beat up? So part of resilience is, planning for some failure and some setbacks, but doing it anyways because we know we'll never be perfectly prepared. And it's that resilience, or some might call it mental toughness. It's that mental toughness piece that will drive us to get better. Third, initiative, action. The number of people I see that are getting ready to get ready and never take action is mind-boggling. They want they want to investigate a little bit more. They want it to be perfect. It's like, you know what, guys? Take your chance. I remember Tony Robbins talking about, do you guys know who Tony Robbins is? Okay. So he tells this story about when he first got into NLP and he was taking this training with all these psychologists, and there was everybody in there but him, not a psychologist, and way younger than everybody else was. And the training was taking on was how to help people stop smoking. And he said, what I know was the average psychologist helps maybe 2 to 3 people a week stop smoking. I wanted to get way better at it, so what I decided was I was going to treat 6 people a day. And so his takeaway was, if I want to get really good at it, I still have to go through as many people, I'm just going to do it faster. So when I say initiative, take action, I say do it a lot, fail faster, and fail 5 times as much. Because Tony's right. You got to get the experience. There's no shortcut for the experience. Do you want to do it fast or do you want to do it slow? But that to me is the initiative. And then the last part is the tenacity. The tenacity is that undying passion, that commitment to carry the ball across the goal line no matter what. It is, you're going to get beat up, you're going to face setbacks, but you know what? It's not an option. I'm going to get it done, and that's what you do. You find a way to get it done, and that's your tenacity. So when you look at grit, and I hope this is the part you're taking away, it's what's my why? How badly do I want it? Because without that why, there will be no try. And then there's the try part. What's my mindset, my growth mindset? What am I willing to do in terms of increasing my resilience? What am I willing to do to increase my, taking action, my initiative? And what am I willing to do to be tenacious? Because if you're not hungry for it and you don't want it, the why and the try just won't work. And without the grit, you can't improve your sales skills. You can't close more deals. You can't stick to your sales process. You won't have execution, and you'll fall flat, which unfortunately would put you in that camper crier category. So, that's my conversation about grit. So, I'm going to end with one quote from Will Smith. Anybody heard his treadmill quote? So Will Smith, you've heard it. So Will Smith says, I know I'm not more talented than anybody else, and he goes into, there's 9 different categories, no matter how you look at it, I'm really no better than anybody else, but there's one difference. If you and I get on a treadmill, one of 2 things is happening. You're getting off first, or I'm dying. And that to me is grit. And if we had that approach in sales, what would happen?
People would die.
People would die. Or we get off first. So, open to Q&A. Right? You factored some time for Q&A in here?
Yeah.
So, Q&A.
So can you train grit?
You can. Grit is a muscle. It can be trained. You just have to find out what's worth getting gritty about. Can you teach grit to somebody in sales who doesn't want to be in sales? No. Can you teach grit to somebody who would like to be in sales and hasn't gotten there? Actually, you and I talked about this one time. You talked about the kid being the soccer coach and the little kid who didn't quite have all the skills, but he had that little fire in his belly. He had grit, and you can take that and work with that. But it's got to be something that they want.
No, I just, as I was listening to you, I was thinking, I know that time, putting in time is important, but I think there's also at some point you're not efficient after that. I'm kind of curious as your efficiency versus, because you put a lot of emphasis on just the hours versus sort of the efficiency. And I just wondered if you had anything to say about that.
Well, there's the old smarter, working harder, or the old quality time versus quantity time. I don't know how you get the one without the other. You got to put the time into, some people call it common sense, but where does common sense come from? Lots and lots and lots of experience. So I don't think there's a magic bullet. I don't think there's a shortcut. I think some get there faster because they put the effort in and they fail faster. But that's just my opinion. I haven't seen anybody who's kind of found that magic thing. If they did, everybody buy it. Go ahead.
So assuming we all know what our passion is, what's one thing we should go out and start doing tomorrow to help build our grit?
If you know what your passion is,
Yeah, assuming we already have that, assuming we're right where we want to be, we want to be there, we have the good reason why. What's one thing we can wake up tomorrow and do to help build our own grit?
okay, great question. Do you remember when you were a kid and you had a teacher or a coach or somebody who saw more in you than you saw in yourself? And they held your feet to the fire and they kicked your butt? Go find a coach who will kick your butt and not let you off the hook. Because we let ourselves off the hook. Also, when we do self-evaluation, we tend to grade on a curve. So there's a bias in our self-evaluation, and they know this from studies. When you ask people to self-rate, they always self-rate themselves higher than they are. So I'd say go get a coach, let them assess you, and let them hold you accountable and kick your butt. And if you won't do the hard work, it'll pay off. Jose?
Which I think goes back to your question about working hard. Everything I've heard of all the stories had to do with, I was willing to come in a weekend, I'm willing to do this, and I also sought a coach to help me. Some outside objective person to give me some feedback as to where maybe I can change, right? Because it's putting in, it's like if you're a baseball player. If you're still swinging the wrong way, 10,000 hours later, you're still swinging the wrong way, right? If you don't make adjustments and you're not willing to make some level of adjustment, the hard work is there, but the faster you get other feedback, I think the faster you'll be able to at least make that subtle adjustment that helps you move faster, right? So.
Absolutely. And if you play golf, which I don't, but if you play golf, I'm sure you see it out on the course all the time, of the guys and gals who've been playing golf for 20 years, but swinging the wrong way. And what kind of harm does that do long term, right? We won't even get into that. So, okay, other questions?
You said the phrase sales DNA a
Yep.
few times.
Yep.
So I was just wondering if you could elaborate on what you mean by that.
Okay, good. So we've identified about 70 different beliefs that salespeople have that either support them in their efforts or sabotage them. So I'm going to call it fear. Some would call it the need to be liked, but the fear of doing what you need to do. So the fear of having the difficult conversation, the fear of asking, do you have money for this? The fear of asking, instead of you're the decision maker, who else besides you is going to be involved in this decision? The fear of asking, who else are you looking at, or what other options are you considering as a solution? The fear of somebody lies to you, you blatantly caught them in a lie, and you don't confront them about that lie because you're afraid if you do, they'll get upset and you won't get the business. Well, they're lying to you anyhow, so there is no relationship. So how you buy personally affects, so that's part of sales DNA. Fear is part of sales DNA. Your need to be liked is part of sales DNA. Your ability to talk about money. So it depends if you grew up in a household where money was an everyday normal conversation, you've got supportive beliefs on that. If you grew up in a family where it wasn't polite to talk about money, or the conversations you had about money was always about how we don't have any and how we need to pinch pennies and save money, then you got that belief. Or how many of you heard something like money is the root of all evil? So if that's a reoccurring theme, then the beliefs you got about money is that money is bad and it's uncomfortable and we're not supposed to talk about it. So what happens when it comes time to have the money budget conversation or investment, or it's time to negotiate? So that's what I mean. So like I said, there's about 70 of those. That's just a couple to give you context. Okay, what else? Who else? Okay.
That's a question. Most of this damn thing. You talked about head trash.
Yeah.
It gets in a lot of our minds, and I've certainly been there myself. You also have a lot of practitioners out there that speak to this idea of positivity.
Yeah.
What role does that really play in addressing the head trash and maybe even helping with building up grit?
Good question. I hadn't heard that one before. It's interesting because when I hear positivity, I think you can still be positive and still have the head trash. I mean, that's the challenge, right? And you don't just will it away. You've got to do the work. So for me, I grew up in an environment, my dad was a preacher. So I grew up in an environment where there was lots of need for approval and conflict was bad. And yet when you're in sales, sometimes you have to confront things. And so I've had to work for years to change my mind on confrontation can bring about change. Change is a good thing. Change gets you to where, a decision. It could be they're qualified. It could be they're disqualified. But I think that head trash, you can still be positive and you can still have all those head trash demons undermining and sabotaging your effort. So positivity, I'm all for positivity. But you still have to do the hard work. And again, there's no shortcut around it. So.
It's work creating your why for where we're going. We all know that. How do we recognize that maybe my why needs to change to get me back where I need to be, or in somebody we're helping coach, that might be a direction? Is there something you've seen in the past?
Yeah, and I think your why changes as your stages of life change, right? You're single, you got different whys. You get married, you have different whys. You have a baby, you have different whys, right? Your parents get older, you have different whys. Your health changes, and not everybody's why is the same. I mean, I've got two people I know. One is extremely obese. Doctor said you need to clean up your act or you're not going to be around here much longer, and hasn't changed a thing. Every time I see him, he just gets bigger and bigger. And I love him dearly, and I'm scared for him. Another friend, got pretty big, doctor said you need to clean up your act, and guess what? Got on top of it, has lost a lot of weight, and done a good job at it. So don't think that, everybody has the same why. It's where are you at in your life, and what's gonna drive you and motivate you, and it changes like the seasons. So I would say, if you're waking up in the morning and you kind of feel like you're muddling through the day and the week, you need to revisit your why. Because your why should be, it should be something I'm going to exaggerate this, it should be something you're willing to die for. You would die, you would die to protect your kids. You would die to protect your spouse. So, it needs to be something that's pretty rock solid.
Is it possible that your why could tell you need to get a job at Starbucks? When you really look at it. I think that your why's not going to make you a salesman every time, a salesperson.
No, maybe your why is, I love to be in the hospitality industry and serve people and not sell. That's okay too. But your why is your why. And yeah, remember I said 43% of the people are just, they're criers and they shouldn't be in sales. There's just not much hope for them.
I'm going to circle back to the responsibility of management in this process and scheme
Yes.
that you put out here, in terms of identifying or categorizing the performance levels based on their characteristics.
Yes.
And fully understand that, and fully have a command of an understanding of these are the various motivations, the why, what is your personal drive relative to sales and non-sales opportunities.
Yes.
But even in the question of your scheme of GRIT, et cetera,
Yeah.
that's a process.
Yes.
And sales is a process.
Yes.
And if you are able to articulate a process relative to the dynamics of your value proposition, relative to the market, the
Yes.
competitive posture of the market,
Yes.
what you're selling, how you're selling it,
Yes.
that process allows others to be coached up to perform and go from that backpacker, as you call it,
Yeah.
to an elite climber. And
Yes.
that's why I say there is a definite responsibility in terms of executive management in this process. It's just not about, well, they're just not performing. Because, the idealistic notion
Yeah.
that you're going to get a draft pick next year that's going to be Heisman Trophy winner of sales
Yeah.
is fantasy.
Yes.
You got to take the pitch with the team you've got and then be able to coach them up. And what you've laid out is essentially here's the way to be able to identify the categories or the qualities of your team.
Yes.
And then the notion of grit, which I fully believe in relative to what is that grain of sand that's going to turn this person into a pearl.
Yes.
Okay? And, and I can't follow the whole idea. But then it still comes down to the guy or the man or woman who's leading the team. It's up to them to make these types of changes,
Yep.
as well as the individual performer.
Yep. That's why I kind of gave you my cheat sheet of, do they get it? Do they want it? And are they capable? And if they're a backpacker, if they're a camper, if they get it, want it, and they're capable, I can move them up to the next level, right? So that's why I'm like, can I upgrade them? Now, a caveat for millennials versus people been doing this for 10 years, right? Now, interesting. So last night I looked at the top performing millennials versus salespeople been doing this for 10 years. There was no difference between the top 10% millennials and the top 10% who've been selling for 10 years. Which is kind of counter to everything you hear about millennials because everybody's kind of beefing about, but I'm going, you know what? There's plenty out there with grit that want an opportunity and don't think they're all, on a different path. Is my diplomatic way of saying it.
So I thought you were going to go the opposite direction in terms of categorizing, let's say, one generation versus another, and that's very.
No, I tell you what, I just hired a kid in community college from Egypt. His parents moved over here. He's the first one in his family to go to college, and he is a hard worker. And so part of my hiring secrets are find an underserved, capable community and work with them. And tell you, people in community college from other countries looking for an opportunity, don't know how the game is played. Great find.
Well, working in the souk is no different than working on Wall Street. So,
Yep,
it's just the numbers and what they're pushing,
yep,
so.
yep. Anybody else? Okay.
No, big
All
thank
yours.
you, Andy.
Thank you.